WJHI's 60 Days, the after-show panel discussion that has gone behind the scenes of the A&E TV show set in the Clark County Jail. That show is called 60 Days In, and it followed 7 innocent people who volunteered to go undercover in the jail for 2 months. In last night's season finale, viewers watched as the last of the participants said goodbye and were debriefed by Sheriff Jamey Noel about what they saw during their time in jail. To talk about that finale, we are joined by Sheriff Noel himself and Captain Scottie Maples. Thank you both for being here. We also have Jennifer Ortiz, a criminal justice professor at IUS, and Major Sam Beard, Clark County Jail Commander. My name is Elizabeth DePompe, and I'm the public safety reporter for the News and Tribune. All right, Sheriff, in last night's episode, you said that the program was a success. Tell us how it was a success and what you learned.
You know, it's not just what we learned, what we need to take investigative action on, what could be going on criminally. And it's not just what we learned and what we need to tweak on how we did things and our rules and regulations to make things better, and what we learned from the debriefs also. But it was a step beyond that exactly we got what we wanted by the fact of using normal everyday people for the most part, was we're able to take things a step further. For example, we learned from these participant debriefs that when they left jail, they went through the same exact things that a normal inmate would feel. They were depressed, they were anxious, they were having a hard time when they went back home, even reintegrating into their normal lives, even though they knew they could get out at any time, technically if they wanted to. So now when someone leaves the Clark County Jail, we provide them with information that's a simple flyer that says, hey, it's normal to feel depressed, it's normal to feel anxious. If it's too much, here's what you can do to try to relieve that. If you still can't handle it, here's the numbers, the suicide hotline, here's a LifeSprings number, mental health provider in Louisville if they're from that area. So we're able to take it a step further than just what can we do to improve how we're doing things at the jail, and what can we do to investigate any potential criminal activity going on, but how can we go a step further into it? And the ultimate goal, besides learning how to improve the jail and then also acting as a deterrent, was what can we do to cut that recidivism rate down, to break this cycle of people getting arrested, rearrested, and arrested again. Because I'm sure as Captain Maples could tell you, or Major Beard, that you see the same faces probably when they started out in corrections 10, 15, in Sam's case over 20 plus years ago to now. I want to break that cycle. And I think with our partnership with the judges, the prosecutor's office, the local Veterans Affairs, and LifeSprings, and doing what we're doing, we're seeing that daily inmate population start to go down. And part of that is too, is what we learned and implemented from the show, that people are no longer getting strung up and high in the Clark County Jail cheaper than what they could on the street. So that's the deterrent. But then also we're implementing our programming and other things that we're doing to improve when someone leaves the Clark County Jail, they may not improve, but they can honestly not say that we didn't give them the opportunity to help improve themselves. So that was really a lot of what we learned and what we implemented.
Jennifer, what do you think people can take away from the show about corrections, and can other facilities in the country take something from it?
Well, I think people should take away the fact that corrections, being incarcerated, is a really negative experience. I think we have this misconception in our society that jail and prison is just easy, because we feed them and we house them, that somehow that just makes life easier. But what they go through is very real. These people are only incarcerated for 60 days, and their response when they're released, I mean, it's just very emotional. And can you imagine if that was 6 months, if that was 6 years, if that was 60 years, how you would feel returning? And I think one of the issues we don't deal with, or discuss rather, with reentry in our country is just that emotional response, and something as simple as hugging someone. If you're a male and you're in prison, you probably haven't had a hug in a very, very long time. So just hugging someone becomes a difficult activity because you're not used to physical contact anymore. And we don't really discuss that issue. So I think things people should take away from this is incarceration is a terrible experience, but then reentry is also a very, very difficult experience. And we can't expect people to be better and not become reincarcerated if we don't deal with their reentry into society.
So each of the participants had a debriefing with both of you. Major Beard, who do you think had the most valuable feedback?
Zach. Because Zach was emotionally stable. He didn't get caught up in a bunch of just drama. He was in there to do a job, and it's a military mindset. We're here to do a job. The sheriff wants me to do this. This is what I got to do. If you notice, during some of his interviews, he said, in his last interview, I really need to get to the sheriff. He was there to do a job. Zach impressed me the most. Zach is going to be successful in life.
Scottie, would you say the same? Do you think Zach had the most valuable?
Yeah, the most valuable information we received, in my opinion, was definitely from Zach. Just in-depth information, and just from the standpoint that people didn't see, while these participants were in here, we pretty much solely had to worry about them. We didn't have to worry about Zach a whole lot because he did everything right.
Mm-hmm. So there, in the previews leading up to the show and throughout the season, there was a lot of buildup of drug activity in the jail, and we saw images of people snorting things that we didn't know what they were. But Tammy, in her debriefing, didn't see any illegal drugs or Suboxone you asked her about, and you said that you were relieved. Were you surprised that you didn't get more feedback about illegal drugs, or did you get any feedback about that?
The sheriff took a strong standpoint before the show started in the Clark County Jail, and he made great strides to remove drugs from the facility. And I think you can see that, as addicts are going to be addicts, snorting nicotine pills, smoking what they call crack sticks, which is, coffee-laced nicotine. That's what they have to resort to in the Clark County Jail now. I can't say that wasn't the case a couple years ago.
So our nicotine products, can you get them on commissary, any kind of?
Yeah, so they're supposed to be taken like a cough drop, where they're supposed to be sucked onto, the nicotine to help someone when they get arrested, that they're a smoker, to help them, to feather off of not smoking anymore. But unfortunately, they crush them up and they store them. They want to re-emulate, what they're doing when they're addicted out, when they can get it out on the street. It won't physically hurt them, like dry out their sinuses, because I struggled. I was going to take them all the way off commissary, but then I got thinking, it's not fair to the people that are using them the correct way. So I didn't want to use a shotgun approach. We initially were going to pull them all the way off. We did for a short while. But then a lot of the inmates were just like, hey, it's not fair for you guys to pick on us because we're doing it the way we're supposed to. So that was a tough decision. That wasn't an easy decision. But it shows just how strong the addiction is. I mean, Lord, when someone results to taking a page out of a Gideon Bible that we can't provide them anymore because they use it for rolling paper to put coffee in to smoke it because they have that need to want to continue to do it. So I'm proud that we don't have the street level drugs in there. We're working on trying to get rid of them altogether. If we ever get our body scanner, that would help a bunch. But at the same time, it shows you how strong the addiction is, and that's what we're dealing with, because 80% of the people in the Clark County Jail, they're in their pretrial detention. They're either there because it's drug related or they've stolen from friends and family members to finance their drug addiction. And unfortunately for us, the dealers are usually the smart ones. They don't end up getting caught because they don't use themselves, but they take full advantage that we're either got a jail of addicts or a jail of addicts that do just enough dealing to be able to continue to support their habit. And so we've added a bunch of programming. As you saw in our debrief with Marion, we talked about it. We had great programming. We've probably got more programming than any other jail around, but we were missing Narcotics Anonymous. We've got that now. And hey, this is a learning process. We're going to continue to learn. And I take full responsibility. Naturally, the jail's not perfect. It's an everyday. We talk about how can we do things differently, how can we do things better. We're trying.
What's the process when someone's booked in who might be going through withdrawal or will go through withdrawal? What do you?
Well, it depends what they're withdrawing from. Xanax. Xanax is fatal when you withdraw from it. So the medical staff evaluates that. We have 2 doctors come in, and we'll put them on something to ease it off of it. Heroin, on the other part, you're just going to get violently sick. You're going to wish you died, but you're not going to die. So we deal with it from a serious medical need standpoint.
And then in terms of if they're there for a long period of time and maybe need counseling for an addiction, is that up to them to pursue, or do you try to put it in front of them and make sure they get in there?
So part of LifeSpring's program now is doing that when people are released, and part of the reason we switched to LifeSprings as our mental health provider is they have that program now, reentry program, that when people need to continue their psych meds or help with their addiction, that they're not just, hey, here you go, have a nice day when they leave the jail. They're actually set up with appointments or to get into programming or whatever they need. Because like I said earlier, I really wish we didn't have anybody in the Clark County Jail. but unfortunately we do, and unfortunately we've got that small percentile that no matter how much we do or try, we're just going to house their body. But what we're primarily focusing on, we'll try to help them, but if they don't want to help themselves, we can't help them. But our big target is that 80% of what can we do to help them not want to come back to jail.
The biggest eyes in our facility falls back to the corrections officer. You know, Captain Maples worked in the jail, and if he was up working one of the pods or wherever he was at, and he seen somebody that was struggling, he would alert the person he could connect them to. So it again, corrections is there to provide custody and care and custody. That's it.
Jennifer, in your experience or your research in prison facilities, how often are these kind of programs, addiction programs, utilized, and how successful or effective do you think they can be?
Well, here's the thing: with someone who is addicted, you can't force them into treatment. So treatment has to be a choice, which means you can only help the people who want to be helped. The addict has to reach the point where they want to get clean, where they want to change their life, and sadly, most of them aren't at that point yet. Mm-hmm. And so most people who will enter a facility addicted will leave a facility either addicted or will return back to addiction very quickly, because drugs afford them a very easy escape from the reality of their lives. In most correctional facilities, drugs are readily available. So if you're heroin addicted, you can use heroin inside. If you're cocaine addicted, you can get cocaine inside. So I think it's very unique at the Clark County Jail that they're not seeing that problem, because at almost every single prison facility, there is a huge drug market. So it's very easy just to stay high. And when you're heroin addicted and you're going through this very physical withdrawal, you're not a very logical, rational person. All you're thinking is, I don't want to be sick anymore. So if someone offers you heroin, you'll just take it because you don't want to feel violently sick anymore. So most of the times, it's not really effective. And when it is effective, it's usually effective within the facility. But then you return them back to the very same neighborhood from which they were incarcerated, and they're usually high crime, high poverty, very high substance use neighborhoods. So it's just easier to get high again.
Can I point out one thing? Sheriff Noel has wanted to come in with these programs, but now we're working on a component that could be a game changer in this community. It's called transitional housing. We're hooked up with a Fortune 500 company that said they would hire 75 people immediately. Now this would be a 360-day program in blocks of 90 days. The first 90 days, you can't leave the facility. And as you do good in this program, we'll loosen up a little bit. And the thing about this is, this company will hire these people if they complete the program full time. And they're going to build something on site.
So what stage are you all at with that program?
We had a building donated to us in a community, and we had a meeting with the people in the community. And you got to understand some people's logic when they hear, well, there are going to be residents in here. First thing they think, we don't want a prison in our neighborhood. We don't want these people coming back they're going to come back to your neighborhood anyway. Do you want them to come back unsupervised? Do you want them to come back needing a job? Or do you want to come back in a structured environment? It's hard to go in jail. These people are getting a structured discipline they never got early in their life. And they get used to that. And then all of a sudden they're released back out in the world. It's not out there.
I want to get back to the debriefings a bit with a Twitter question. @Shun812 asked about how long were the participant debriefing interviews. Editing makes it seem like 30 to 60 seconds. Tell us a little bit more about this.
So they lasted about an hour, hour and a half, depending. Zach's naturally was longer than what Robert's was, for example. So yeah, they did, because I guess for the sake of time, of airtime, they were edited down or cut down. But everything what you saw was factual, and a lot of the positive things and experiences were cut out, and that's okay too. But we got the information that we needed to improve the facility, so that really helped. So on average, they were an hour to hour and a half.
Scottie, was there anything from those debriefings that we didn't see on air that you think people should know about?
Oh, well, Zach particularly came in, and the first thing he told Sheriff Noel was the inmates are saying that you are winning, that they do not want to be in the jail, and that it's a completely different jail than it was in the past. And that was one thing that wasn't shown, and like the sheriff said, that's all right. But just, for the community to know, we are doing the best we can, and I truly do believe we're making an improvement.
Was there any other kind of feedback? So we heard a lot about drugs or illegal kind of activity in the jail, having more programs. We heard about the CERT team, which I will ask you about also in a minute. But was there anything else that maybe wasn't entertaining enough for air that they talked to you about?
Yeah, absolutely. The part that every participant either named one or the same corrections officers' names kept coming up over and over again, the ones that were doing a good job. That when that inmate or the participant went to sleep at night, that they felt safe because they knew that Officer Capehart or Officer Cunningham or the major was going to do a walkthrough. They identified who the corrections officers that went above and beyond, that it wasn't just a job to them, they knew, they cared about it, and they said, hey, they're firm, but they're fair. And so I was able to personally thank every one of those officers, and those are officers now that we have training new corrections officers. So you don't see that in the program, but that's huge to me because we've got a lot of good staff and a lot of good corrections officers that their heart and soul's into it. It wasn't shown, but I know it, and I got to personally thank them, and that was a lot for me, rewarding for me to be able to do that.
And to hit on that a little bit, it was kind of refreshing to see that the inmates and the participants, they wanted a structured officer. They wanted an officer that ran it by the book because it made their life easier in there. It didn't give the control to the other inmates. The officers that he mentioned, along with Officer Wilson, were common names that kept coming up, and these are officers that run it by the book, very firm, and that's who they want it. That's who the other inmates want it because it made their life easier to have a structured environment.
Major Beard, there was some feedback on the CERT team and the shakedowns, and there were things that were just being missed. How did you take that feedback?
We can always improve on that, and that comes through training, that comes through live maneuvers and things like that. Usually when the CERT teams, shakedowns can happen any time, night or day. All the inmates know that. And like the last part there where the sheriff found out there was a shank, he called me, Major, there's a shank here. I mean, we didn't go there to collect stuffing and stuff. We went after that shank or shanks. A lot of times when the CERT team's called, it could be a physical altercation, it can be a weapon. So we go in there with a focus and a mindset.
So did you learn anything specifically that you think could improve the CERT team?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have the sheriff's all about training. We have two guys that went to a nationally certified CERT instructors program. We've got all kinds of less than lethal weaponry we can go. We did a maneuver yesterday. We got to sharpen ourselves every day. And one of the things that upset me, and I'll probably get a smile out of this, is these jail experts. Man, I've been in this business 35 years. How can you put that by your name? Or CERT experts, we're all learning and growing. No matter how long you've been in it, we're all learn and grow. Am I perfect every day? Absolutely not.
Something else we heard about were the jail trustees, and Tammy said that they were causing problems for the facility. Explain what a trustee is and why you all implement those.
So an inmate worker is someone that's their classification is low enough where they can be trusted. They still have to be watched. Unfortunately, they have more access than what any other inmate would have because they help serve the food, they help clean, they help do different parts of the jail. So as you well know and what you saw in the show, sometimes we got to do our random checks to make sure that they're not doing something that they're supposed to be doing. I can let the major captain hit a little bit more on that, but so they're put in a position of trust as an inmate worker, but we got to monitor it too.
So what kind of jobs or tasks are they doing?
Go ahead.
And they handle helping our meal prep, serving our meals, bringing the meals up to the pods to the officers, laundry, help run the commissary. All this is supervised, by the way. This isn't just inmates running around. And as you see, the staffing issue is already an issue for the corrections officers in our facility. So we have to utilize these inmates to help with these things because we wouldn't be able to get it done.
Do they ever work outside of the facility?
We have a few, but they're supervised with an officer all the time, and that's only a select few. We certainly sometimes go times where we don't even have a crew that can go outside because we don't have trustworthy enough inmates to make that list.
Classifications is 1 through 9. 1 being this person's going to be locked down 23 hours in a cell because they're the most violent, they got the biggest charges. And we start our inmate worker selection, I like to call them inmate workers because trustee paints a bad visual. They start at about level 6. Now when they go outdoors, they gotta be in the 7, 8, 9 range. But you gotta understand, if you're in jail for child support, and you're a trustee and one of the inmates in a section who's in, you gotta handle different sections. You got a guy in there for murder, and he said, you better pick his package up, or you better do this, or you better do that. There's a lot of pressure within inside being an inmate worker.
Jennifer, in prison facilities, what kind of role does the inmate worker play?
Exactly the same. I mean, they will do custodian work, right? So they are the ones who will mop up, the entire facility. The inmates prep food, inmates serve food, inmates work at the law library. Inmates literally do all of these functions. And I think it has a very positive role for these inmates because it encourages them to behave. It's everyone wants to work in the cafeteria. That's the best job in the entire facility because you get to prep the food and you also get to get extra food. So that motivates inmates to behave because as soon as you misbehave, you will lose your job. So I think it plays a very positive role for them. Besides, we don't want them sitting around doing nothing. So having a job teaches them discipline, teaches them to be up early in the morning before everybody else to prep breakfast, right? It teaches structure and teaches order. So they operate almost exact same positions.
Do you think it helps them transition once they're released?
I think it can.
Yeah.
But again, that's affected by society's response to them. So a guy who has worked in a prison cafeteria for 10 years knows how to prep food. You should probably give him a food prep job, but then people are afraid because he was in prison for 10 years that he's going to come out and he's going to, commit crime or harm their business again. So I feel like it does help them transition, but then society's negative response to them makes it almost impossible.
Mm-hmm. How often do you all see that run into that? There's this people judging anyone who's convicted of a crime or even charged with a crime, and how can they overcome that, I guess?
You own a business, okay? Are you going to hire Daffron when he gets out?
Right.
Are you?
But I also feel like most people are not Daffron. Most people who are in prison are there, or jails rather, are there for petty, non-violent, oftentimes drug-related offenses. So we're not talking about the murderers and the rapists, who most of us probably don't want working at these places. But there is a serious stigma against people who have felony records, right? They're 50% less likely to be called back for a job interview. If they're black and have a felony record, they have a 5% chance of being called for a job, right? And that's the group that is most likely to have a criminal record. So they come home, they can't find a job, even if they have the motivation, because the most motivated person is that offender who has just been released, right? They're determined not to go back. They want to change their life. Then they apply for 25 different jobs, get denied for every single one, and quickly realize, what's the point? I'm just going to go back to my old neighborhood. I'm just going to sell drugs again. I can make easy money. I can provide for my family. Society won't give me a second chance. And they quickly become discouraged. And I feel like if we had more transitional programs that offer these people a guaranteed job, they might feel like there's some hope. There's also the issue that they come home, they can't find a job, so their family has to support them. Now their family begins to resent them because now they're just this extra financial burden. So this man comes home, he has a wife who has 2 kids, who's been raising those 2 kids by herself. Now she has to support him too because he can't go and get a job. That starts to destroy marriages, it starts to destroy his relationship with his children, and then it just quickly becomes this discouragement for him to do anything right.
Major Beard, do you want to add something?
We got a Residents Encounter Christ program going on this weekend at the jail. I spoke, it's a 3-day weekend. Do you know we got 6 people that were locked up when Sheriff Noel took over? They got out, hooked up with some mentors. They've got jobs now. Their families are back together. They're coming in and being a part of this weekend. So we got a lot of positive things going on. we're chipping away at this problem, and that's the stuff people don't see. But a lot of people in southern Indiana are involved in the MAS community, and they see it every day, and they praise Sheriff Noel. They praise all of us for what we do, because we do care.
And something we're doing on the back end of this that's not being seen, to maybe try to answer your question in a different light, is that, you know, we have a ton of schools coming in now to tour the jail. A ton of young adults, high school kids are watching the show, and this is the message we're trying to get out. If you do commit a crime, look at all these stigmas you've got to overcome the rest of your life. Every job application you put down, you've got to report that crime. Because, you know, the job application now doesn't say if you were convicted. It says, were you ever arrested for a felony or misdemeanor? That's the way they can find it out without a background check. So the awareness of, you know, one bad decision when you're young in life could affect you until the day you die.
Do you think Isaiah was one of those participants who really walked away with that?
Isaiah was my choice of who it affected the most positively. You know, I don't know a whole lot about Isaiah's background prior. I don't really want to speak of it, but I do feel that Isaiah came out a completely different man. His whole temperament was different. His whole demeanor was different. I still stay in touch with him. I think he's doing good things, and I don't know if he didn't do this program if he would be there in life.
I want to switch gears a bit and talk about Zach. What did you all make of his bond with Brian, who's also a Marine veteran, and how emotional he kind of got toward the end there?
I think you see a lot of Marines. There's a big brotherhood there, probably more so. A lot of respect to all branches. Marines got a camaraderie that you just don't see as much in some of the others. So they had that common bond there. But it showed a lot of what vets go through. You know, they have a rough time when they're in service, or when they're serving overseas, or when they're deployed. Then they start to self-medicate because they can't deal with the stuff that they saw. So now, within 72 hours, like I said earlier, they're getting identified as a veteran. Or even if they don't tell us, we're still cross-checking every day the jail log, where they're getting special treatment, where within 72 hours, they're getting interviewed by the local Veterans Affairs officer. What do you need? What can we help with? Or if they're eligible, with our partnership with the courts and with the prosecutor's office for the Veterans Court, where now if they successfully complete that, that charge could be lessened, it could be dismissed, or the jail time could be less if they do that. So, yeah, they did get a strong bond, but that didn't surprise me at all.
Jennifer, what did you make of it? And do you know nationally kind of the trends or statistics of veterans ending up in jail or prison?
So I know we have we have just over 180,000 veterans currently incarcerated. As I said before, 77% of those have been honorably discharged. So individuals who have honorably served our country, but 55% of them are suffering from some mental health issue, usually PTSD. And I personally feel that if we treated our veterans better as soon as they came back home, we wouldn't see 180,000 veterans incarcerated, because a lot of them are suffering through some very traumatic issues, things most of us wouldn't even be able to begin to comprehend, and they turn to substance use, and they turn, and then once they're substance addicted, they turn to petty crime, and it quickly escalates, and it all begins with the trauma that they experience and the fact that we don't treat them properly. I mean, I think it's absolutely horrible that we have homeless veterans, that we have veterans who have nowhere to actually turn to. And not to bash anyone, but I think that our VA can do a much better job taking care of them once they come home.
From what you've seen, are programs in prison facilities geared towards veterans? Is that pretty typical?
There aren't usually veteran-specific programming, and I think if you had former veterans like Zach come into a facility and have a veterans program where he can speak to them and have that sense of camaraderie, we might actually make some headway with those guys.
Yeah. I'm going to turn to another Twitter question from Sandy Milo. Will the participants be safe when these convicts, she says, get out and realize they were lied to? Was there any concern about their safety once they were released?
Well, of course, naturally, we gave them their training, what to do, what not to do. We try to limit their contact with former inmates once they got out. But part of the reason we picked them from way away from this area is to hopefully to limit that contact. So if there is any problem, they've been trained, they know what the instructions are due to notify me, then I'll notify the appropriate law enforcement agency, because they're all from out of state. And so I think we did the best that we could to minimize that. Could it happen? there is a possibility.
Can you talk a bit about the lengths that you all went to conceal their identity from the booking process?
Yeah, pretty much everybody was given a false identity. We allowed them to pick their last name because, inmates are called by their last name in the facility. So, I allowed them to pick what it could be because they had to respond to it. Everything was altered completely as far as no traces back. As soon as they were out of the program, their records have been purged. And there was a lot of links to go by. Just for the fingerprints, for instance, all fingerprints are done digitally now, sent directly to the state. That was an obstacle we were trying to get over. The machine actually went down the week of we were placing these inmates in, and we were doing old school fingerprint rolling. So that was kind of a blessing in disguise.
That was just
yeah, because that was one thing we were thinking, like, how are we going to have to, these are things that people didn't realize, we said it time and time again, it's very, very hard to sneak somebody into jail today with all these checks and balances. To the Zach thing, Zach, there was an article that Zach said, veterans didn't get help. And Zach didn't declare that he was a veteran because he knew our system's so airtight that they would have checked his name and found out he wasn't a veteran and lying, and then maybe could have opened some eyes. If Zach would have gave his real name, which we couldn't allow, and said he was a veteran, somebody would have been meeting with him within 72 hours in the Clark County Jail. But he obviously didn't know that because he didn't participate in that because he had to lie about some things.
Any concerns that you were able to get these fake identities past your correction staff?
It bothered me because some of the people that we had in place, the safety net did not catch it. They didn't catch any of the participants in either one of the seasons. But our secondary safety net, thank goodness, did. So that was a problem that I had to fix in-house. Because we're trying to randomly check to make sure people aren't in past their court date or their extradition has not took too long. So that was an eye-opener. It was caught, but it was caught on the safety net versus the first line where it should have been caught. And unfortunately, we had to take disciplinary action for people that were involved in that.
Scottie, talk a bit about your role with the show, because you were kind of their point person.
The sheriff is the boss, and the reason I'm really a part of it was the secrecy of the show. Being the public information officer, I took the phone call, and then after that, it actually worked out all right because I started my career in corrections. Sam Major Beard was the boss when I started. When I was 19 years old. So I know about corrections. I have a passion for corrections. I have a passion for the sheriff's office. After that, the sheriff blessed the program. We were both heavily involved, but the sheriff was still running the facility and a police department. So I was kind of a liaison as far as helping getting things together for bringing some of the participants into the facility. That's a lot of work. There was a lot of sleepless nights the first couple nights. We have really good corrections officers. Really good corrections officers ask a lot of questions when something doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And there had to be a few times that a phone call was made and it's like, I'm the captain, just let it go. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hear any more questions. That's tough to tell one of your guys that is asking questions. I found myself being frustrated with the good officers because they were making very good decisions and questioning things they should have questioned. And after the show, there was no hard feelings. We all talked about it. But the most frustrating officers we had were the ones doing the best jobs for us because if it doesn't make sense, they ask questions, and that's what you do in law enforcement.
What was the reaction from the staff? Because very few people knew about this for a while. What was their reaction?
Oh, it was positive. That was probably one of my most nervous days as being sheriff when we stood up in front and talked about it. But they were excited about it, because it was a checks and balances at the same time of what can we do to improve the facility. The only people that appeared to be upset is the people that I think it registered in their mind that they missed stuff or they did stuff that they weren't supposed to be doing, which was very, very few. But unfortunately, those people are no longer employed at the sheriff's office either. So, but overall, I was nervous about it for the staff because it not that it kind of gave. I didn't want to really give the appearance that I'm second guessing what they're doing or I'm sneaking around doing something. But at the same time, we did a program that improved and we had some stuff that we needed to fix along the way. But overall, it went pretty smooth.
You just touched on this, but I want to go to a Twitter question from Lady Karen. Did any officers lose their jobs after the show? And I would specify that a little more. Was there any disciplinary action, or did anyone lose their jobs based on what was discovered during the program?
Unfortunately, there was. Several were terminated. They resigned prior to being terminated. But we also had a lot of good officers that resigned that got hired at other police agencies, the state police, Jeff City Police, New Albany Police. So it was a mix of there, and it was tough. It wasn't easy to do. But there was some stuff that if it was a mistake, let's fix it. But some of these mistakes were so egregious that there wasn't just something I could let go.
Can you talk about what some of those mistakes were?
I can't, because some of it I did earlier when I talked about, that some of the inmates weren't caught that weren't supposed to be in there, but some of it is still going through the appeals process, and then some of the criminal stuff is still going through the courts.
Okay. So can you talk a bit more about what changes you all have made specifically to the jail since the show, or because of the show?
Oh, wow. We could go on for hours, but like I talked earlier about the pamphlet about suicide awareness and depression when they leave, to what we've improved as far as the veterans doing, but a lot of it is just basically doing Monday night quarterbacking. What can we do as far as improving our training? What did we miss? It's all been really positive.
What we did, Miss Elizabeth, is we re-implemented the field training officer program. We're getting that up and going strong. What we do is we take a corrections officer, and Captain Maples can remember when we did this. You can put an officer with me, and the next day put them with Captain Maples, and the next day put them with the sheriff. That's not good. You want to go with a strong officer like Officer Capehart that does things by the book. Put the officer with them. Now, he's not going to be a clone. Sooner or later, your personalities, but he'll know the main principles of that job. And we'll have a checkoff list, and when they're cleared, it goes all the way through the chain of command. They sign off, and it becomes a part of their employee packet.
Also, as part of the show, you all received a $60,000 facility fee. Was that for both seasons?
Yeah, it was combined, correct.
And do you know how you'll use that money?
Yeah, I mean, we're well on our way now to our body scanner, what we want to do there, but we've been able to do a lot as far as training and the equipment for CERT and stuff that we needed to do, because the CERT team, the sheriff's office had one years ago, kind of went away, so we basically had to not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but resurface all that to be able to do it. And that was, that's to help with additional searches when there's problems in the facility. So that's been a blessing. But the biggest blessing also has been the fact that we were able to take our, some cases 20, in some cases 10-year-old camera technology, and we're able to get a free upgrade basically, to where now it's not just you can tell movement, you can tell if it's male or female, but you can actually zoom in and really see what an inmate's writing with that camera system. That's been a great help as far as us catching inmates that were cheeking their medicines. Even if they were doing it so slick that the officer in front of them wasn't doing it, we had an officer in the pod office literally zoomed right in their mouth. And I think day one that we had control of those cameras, and we caught 6 inmates cheeking their meds. And
we received technology from the show that I think would never be obtainable by a county jail. Even if we were able to get a new system, there was no way that we would be able to go to the lengths of the camera quality that we received in donation of this. We would have got a better system than we have now, but I don't think it would be anywhere near what we received gifted to us.
agree.
You all had a booth at Thunder River Louisville where you sold T-shirts and jail tots. How much money did you raise, and how close are you to potentially getting that body scanner?
We were about $5,000, from what we raised. It was really responsive. We got so much of a response, we did a second order of shirts that people can stop by the sheriff's office and buy at the front lobby there. It's went well. And I'd say we're well over halfway there to get the funding that we need for the body scanner. And why that's important to me is because I don't want weapons in the jail, but then the people are so addicted sometimes that they're literally putting those drugs in their body cavities. We'll catch that, because if we stop as much as we can all the street level drugs, it helps get that addict to the point where they're like, well, I can't get any more. Now's the time for me to step up and try to get off of my addiction or whatever. So that's the big plus for us.
And there's tools in law enforcement that sometimes improve, and then there's tools that are game changers. And a body scanner is a game changer. It's, I can't say that it'll eradicate all drugs in the jail, but it is a game changer in the corrections. It's something that, it's not an improvement of something, it literally changes the game.
So there is a season 2 that should air in September, you said. Jennifer, what do you hope to see out of the second season that could kind of build on what we've already seen?
Well, I think one thing that the public will see is some of the improvements that were put into place. I think you'll see a jail that's different than you saw in season 1. Of course, there'll be editing, so you're still going to see dramatic things, but I think you will see an improvement. And it's going to be interesting to see this new host of characters and what they bring to this experience.
Major Geary.
It's a long time till September, and we got a lot of work to do.
Sheriff, why did you decide to sign on for a second season?
You know, because the neat part about it is it was a whole nother set of eyes. In this case, it's going to be 8 more eyes. That we started. We only had a few weeks to start implementing some of the changes, but the unique opportunity to bring in different people, like in season 2, you have a corrections attorney, which is huge for us from a risk and liability standpoint of what he saw and what his suggestions are. You're going to see a retired captain from out west from the state police that's in that undercover capacity that he's able to give us feedback. And then probably my favorite so far in season 2 is Mona Lisa. You know, she's got a daughter that's incarcerated that started out with addiction, did some pretty serious crimes. But Mona Lisa started out right to reminding the captain's face, and I don't like cops, just to be honest with you. And I think you'll watch her change as the program goes on. So we're able to take that second set of 8 eyes to continue an improvement process of what we can do to make things better.
Scottie, what do you hope comes out of season 2?
Well, season 1, this has never been done before in America, pretty much. So it's very tough to pull off initially. A lot of our obstacles in the beginning weren't concentrated on the actual participants as much as the process to get them in. We felt like after we did season 1, we had the process down. We knew what we needed to look at, where we had problems at before. So we were able to really fine-tune the participants that we were able to get into the facility. I think they'll be a little bit more credible when they get out, when you see it. I think that's because we did a better job of vetting them, because we knew the system, we knew what we needed. And like the sheriff said, there wasn't drastic changes made initially. This was on a tight time frame. This was all done consecutively, so we wasn't implement, so we just based on, we didn't want you to look at the nitty gritty stuff that we know we have problems with. We know people, smoke tobacco when they can get it. We want to look at the bigger picture, and I think we got that out of season 2.
Cool, very good. Well, thank you all. And that's it for this episode of Inside 60 Days. As always, thank you to Jeffersonville High School for letting us use their studio every week. Thank you to Tim Dench and all of the students who help us. And thank you all for watching and for sending us your questions every week. Keep following newsandtribune.com for more behind-the-scenes stories in the Clark County Jail and more. Have a good weekend.